Hello, my friends, and thank you so much for joining me today. Welcome to the podcast. In fact, welcome back to the podcast in 2021. I'm your host, Ingrid Thompson, and my business is Healthy Numbers. I am on a mission to teach every business owner to understand how money works in their business. I know, massive. Super important to me and for you, because when you truly understand how money works in your business, your life changes completely and forever. You make more money in your business. Importantly, you make more profit, and you can start paying yourself the salary you deserve. Imagine that. How does that sound? Today is a short episode, and I just want to explain about taking a break and where I've been and where we're going next with this podcast. It's super important that I let you know what's going on so that you can come along on the next stage of this journey. And it's all good and it is exciting. I started this podcast back in March 2015. That is almost 6 years ago, because I was inspired by a podcast that I was listening to at the time, JLD, John Lee Dumas, Entrepreneur on Fire. And he has been on my podcast, and I've been a guest on his podcast as well. So prior to that, and about 10 years ago, I was asked to speak at a conference for virtual assistants about podcasting and how a VA could add value to their client by understanding and knowing about podcasting. It created such a lot of interest at the time. I was using recording interviews to share information with my audience. I was fascinated by how we could use podcasting for business. I'm a lifelong radio nerd, and I've always felt that podcasts are just like listening to the radio, only even more convenient now. So my podcast came about when I started the process to write my book. I thought it would be good to interview people about how they got started in their business so that we could learn from them. No one else was doing it at the time. Now there's dozens, hundreds of startup business podcasts. So I wanted to interview a variety of business owners because I know how much we can learn from other industries. Years ago, when I worked in the corporate world, I was on a project that taught me that we learn from a range of businesses across industries, that what works in this business over here can be applied to other businesses that have nothing to do with that same industry. So the example I often give to people is the project I was working on in Ready-Mix, which is the largest concrete company in Australia, those big trucks with that kind of swirling around concrete. Ready-Mix wanted to improve their delivery and their service. And we looked around, who else does what we do that we could learn from? And if you've heard this example before, you know that we looked at Pizza Hut. How could Pizza Hut deliver their pizzas so fast? When you think about it, the businesses were actually quite similar in the fact that their steps were similar. The customer orders the concrete or the pizza. The company makes the concrete or the pizza and delivers it. They deliver it fast, they deliver it on time, and exactly to the specifics of what the customer orders. So this is why I wanted to bring a range of different businesses for my podcast so that we could learn from every business. And the questions I ask have stayed close to the same pretty much since the beginning, all those years and episodes ago. As you've probably noticed over time, some of the interviews are more like conversations between me and my guest rather than the sort of rigid question and answering style interview. And I think that has been an evolution of podcasts in general, that they have become more of this sort of long form conversation. If you've been listening for a while, you know that I often have quite a bit to add to the other person's perspective and bring what the guest is saying to make it more informative and more interesting for you, my listeners. So it's more conversational than interview style. Every 2 weeks for pretty much the whole time since I started, there has been a new episode arrive. There's a web page for each episode where you can listen without subscribing to iTunes or to Stitcher or whatever platform you use. And who knew that there would be so many different platforms? Just last week, another platform was added. Some of the episodes have full transcripts on my website as well, www.healthynumbers.com.au. So a few months ago, I started adding short snack-sized episodes of just me in between the interviews, and so I called them the In-Between Episodes. And they're now an episode pretty much every week. So there's the interview, and then on the other week there is the In-Between episode. So here's the thing. The shorter episodes are becoming as popular, in fact, if not more popular than some of the interview conversations. So this has had me thinking, and I have to admit, I've been thinking, where's this podcast going for a little while now? So, I asked my mastermind group, what did they think I could do with the podcast, and what could I do? And I have to be 100% honest, I didn't really like any of their suggestions. It's always good to go ask other people their thoughts and their opinions and their ideas. But sometimes in our business, we are the ones that know what's best for our own business. And my darling dad used to have this lovely expression. He used to always say, Ingrid, if in doubt, don't. If in doubt, don't. So I didn't really quite know what to do with the podcast, so I didn't do anything. Except I did take a break, which is why there haven't been any episodes for a few weeks. I've had time to think about what to do and where to go, and also to look at the data, to look at the numbers. When we're faced with a business decision, it's always important to look at the numbers for evidence of what's going on. I work with clients every day, and this is one of my recurrent themes, is the numbers tell the story. So what did the data tell me? There are hundreds of downloads for every episode. We know that the podcast is in the top 20% of podcasts. There are almost 2 million podcasts, and this little podcast is in the top 20%. So thank you. Thank you to each and every one of you for listening and for sharing the episodes with others. I looked at the map of where the downloads are, and 80 different countries around the globe. There are listeners. So if you're listening to this, there's you and there's 79 other countries of people listening to the podcast. The US remains by far the largest audience. So thank you to my listeners and my friends in the US for tuning in to iTunes, to Stitcher, to wherever you listen. iTunes is the most used for downloading as well. So then I checked my book sales, because in the podcast, the only advertising I have, and I've made that a decision, I don't want to have spammy advertising in the middle of my podcast, because it drives me crazy when I'm listening to a podcast and I press that little fast forward 15 seconds button, because the only advertising on my podcast is me and what I do and my book. And I went back to my book sales, and there's consistent book sales across all the channels. Some weeks are higher than others. So thank you if you're listening and you have bought my book. The book is So You Want to Start a Business. It's available wherever you buy your books online, and some bookshops can order it as well. So I truly appreciate everybody who's bought the book. So we know that the podcast leads to book sales. There's a private Facebook group, and every time a new member comes along and I ask questions, about 1 in 2, so about 50%, about half the people said, I heard about this Facebook group on the podcast. So the data says the podcast is valuable to the listeners. So that's good enough for me to keep the episodes coming into your podcast stream. So I had reached a point last year where I had made a list of all the marketing activity I do for my business, the podcasts, the blogs, the newsletters, my website, the Facebook group, the weekly live-webinars, the activity I do on LinkedIn, the webinars that I run. There is more than 10 regular content distribution, and I have to say I was feeling a bit overwhelmed. And I have discovered that there actually is a technical term for what I was feeling. It was marketing content burnout. Yep, that was me, burnt out. So what would have to go? And this is what had me thinking about the podcast. And let me tell you, my wonderful listeners, my friends, the podcast is definitely staying put. So I don't want to be burnt out. I love communicating using this forum. I love interviewing people. So the podcast is staying. This important aspect is that the range of different people listen to the podcast. Some of you listening have not actually started your business yet. Some of you are listening because you want to find out the sorts of things you want to think about before you get started. Some of you are loving listening to podcasts, and this is one of the ones you listen to. Some of you just love listening to me and my Australian accent and the way I put things and the way I make things simple. I received an email from a listener who says, Ingrid, you are just so real, and I love that. And that's me. I'm real, authentic, genuinely interested in business and fascinated by how business works, and want to bring you the examples and the stories so it can make you feel inspired and authentic and interested in business. Another listener emailed me and said, Ingrid, it is so obvious that you just love chatting with your guests. And I do. Every guest who has ever been on the show has said to me at the end of the interview or the conversation, this is the best interview I have ever done. So what's next? As we take this podcast into 2021 and it's into its 7th year. So maybe that was the 7-year itch thing happening. So what is going to happen? From now on, we're going to have more of me, more of the Inbetween episodes, only now they've got equal billing. They're just episodes. The interviews are definitely continuing, and in fact, I already have some terrific interviews lined up with some wonderful guests already recorded and ready to go. So another reason I couldn't stop. These wonderful people have made time to tell their stories, so I want to honor that by sharing these episodes. So stay tuned for those. So my one-off, my Ingrid Bites, or I haven't quite worked out. If you've got any ideas about what to call it, please send me an email, ingrid@healthynumbers.com.au. So my episodes will be a mix of things. Mindset. Having the right mindset is so vital to being able to be in business, and especially when it comes to money. This will be a recurring theme. There'll also be practical episodes, talking about pricing and discounts and expenses and cash flow. In episode 145, where I talk about the difference between revenue and profit and what is the difference, one of the most listened to podcasts of all time. So I know the practical, bite-sized, easy to understand approach to explaining money and how it works in your business is what you are looking for. And I know because you're sharing it with friends and colleagues and family members and people you know who are interested in business. So what we're here for is to unravel the mysteries of money in your business, helping you figure out the business financials, keeping it simple, keeping it real. Over the past month, I've run a couple of webinars, and I'll certainly bring some of that content into the podcast. Calculating expenses, managing cash flow. I'll include examples from clients with their permission and always honoring full confidentiality. I've been working with small business owners for almost 20 years, and I have a ton of examples and case studies. You've probably heard me refer to things in the podcast. If you're in the Healthy Numbers Profit Lab Facebook group, you've seen some of our examples there. It's all about the purpose to help you have consistent results in your business. And I want to take this moment to tell you about an accelerator. Accelerate your business financial understanding starting soon. It's a 6-week course. It's a 6-week program, weekly sessions with a 2 monthly follow-up sessions after that. So 1 month and 2 months later, to bring you the basic of financial understanding, to truly understand how money works in your business. So if 2021 is your year to truly get your head around the number side of your business, head over to my website and have a look at this page, www.healthynumbers.com.au/money. And it's not a sales page, I promise. It's got no tacky countdown timers and pages of sales, blah, blah. It's a simple page with some of my hand-drawn models and explaining what we're going to do in the accelerator. We're going to tackle the 3 biggest challenges. Challenge number 1, don't know where to start with the finances. Challenge number 2, the belief that you're not a numbers person. And the third challenge is a really interesting one. And this is where there are some business owners feel they are doing okay, in air quotes. But the truth is they actually know secretly that they're winging it and they don't truly understand the money side. There's always some money in the bank and they kind of are doing okay, but they know they're winging it. So if any of this sounds like you, please jump over to healthynumbers.com.au/money and take a peek at that page and have a read through and let me know. There's a button there that you can just send me an email. Okay, it's not a sales page. There's no buy now buttons. It just talks about what the program is. Okay, so to wrap up this episode, actually I've talked for a little bit longer than I thought. Who would have thought? Thank you for continuing to listen in. Thank you for your emails, your reviews. They always make me smile. If you're here for the first time, please subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if you haven't subscribed because you've been listening to a few episodes, maybe it's time to subscribe. I know what happens though. We get all those podcasts listed in our subscriptions. I've got so many now. Every now and again we go through and have a little cull. I totally get that. All right, so let's take this podcast into its 7th year in style. Thank you so much for listening. And I always ask this question at the end of every podcast: what action are you inspired to take today?